Most startup sales messaging misses the point, and when companies try to make it better, they often make it worse instead. Let's fix it. Let's start off by defining what's going wrong. So right now, for many startup sales teams, if you look at your conversations, what they actually focus on is either the features of your product or your company's kind of vision for how it's going to change the world. And those topics seem really important and meaningful to you, but the reality is that they don't connect with prospects' needs, and therefore they don't persuade prospects to buy. So what I want to do in this video is get you to a place where you have sales-ready messaging that influences prospects' decisions. And we're going to do that using the P.S.I concept of themes. And the other thing I want to deliver for you is to ensure that your messaging shapes live, real sales conversations and adapts to that specific deal using the concept of summary slides. So let's dig into kind of what some of the challenges are with your status quo. So for a lot of startups, there are kind of two basic types of conversations that you're having. And so the first of these is what's known as a vision pitch. The basic idea behind the vision pitch is, hey, our company is going to change the world, right? There's this huge trend that's happening out there, and we are going to take advantage of it, or we're going to shape it, and that's going to create this massive change in the market space. This works really well when you're raising money, right? Because what it does is it shows venture capitalists that if your company works, it's going to be a really big company. So it's great for that context. But the problem is when you use it in a sales context, your prospects is, okay, great, you're going to change the world, but what does it have to do with me, right? How does it help my business? And so it doesn't persuade in a sales context. Another type of conversation that a lot of startups will have is what's known as a how-to demo. And just as the name implies, you're basically showing somebody how your product works. Now, this is typically what you get if you ask your product or your engineering or your implementation team to kind of show your sales team how to do a demo, right? The types of demos that those more technically focused teams do really are about, hey, this is how you use this cool thing that we bought, that we built. The problem is when you use that in a sales context, the prospect's going to say, hey, all right, this is some cool tech. You really know your stuff, but why do I care? Like, what does this actually have to do with me? So when startups try to fix this situation, they kind of start with the insight that they need to find a way to talk about value more. And so often what they'll do is they'll kind of look at kind of product marketing developed messaging frameworks. And so this is an example of a really good, really smart product marketing messaging canvas. So we're thinking about kind of what our prospect is trying to do, what they're doing now, what the challenges are, and this is really useful if you're thinking about your overall positioning. And it's very smart and very thoughtful, but gosh, is it complicated, right? We've got 23 different boxes, we've got a bunch of arrows. And it's not really clear how this turns into a sales conversation. And in particular, it's not very clear how a salesperson takes these ideas and then kind of adapts them to the needs of a specific deal that they're working on. Now, another thing that companies will do is they will try to deploy a sales methodology. And there's a lot of good methodologies out there. The trick is that many of them are not really about how you talk to a prospect. So for example, MEDDIC, which is a great framework, it's really kind of about qualifying a deal to be sure that it's a real deal. So just to unpack the MEDDIC framework, right, each of the letters stands for something that you're supposed to verify, right? So we have M for metrics, E for economic buyer, D for decision criteria, decision process, identify a pain, identify a champion, and kind of differentiate from competition. So these are fantastic tools to use if you're inspecting a deal. right, to see if to see if it's a real deal or to see if there's something missing from that deal. But it's not really an outline for having a conversation, right? You wouldn't lead off a conversation by talking about metrics and then talking about the final decision maker, right? That's not really a guide for a conversation. So what I want to present to you today is a set of tools that you can use as you're figuring out how to actually talk to customers and when you're trying to motivate them to make a purchase. And so the core kind of place to start is the idea of themes, right? What we want to do is we want to define the major messages that you want to appear throughout your entire sales process. In PSI selling, we refer to those as themes. And there's basically three types of themes that you'll kind of build your sales messaging out of. So let's have a look at each of these theme types and talk about their content. So the first type of theme is problem themes, right? And these are designed to show the need for action and to shape the search for a solution. In other words, to prove to somebody, hey, you've got to do something, and let me give you an idea of what type of thing you might need to do, right? And lo and behold, that sets up our solution, right? So we have solution themes, and these talk about how our product helps, right? And it's an important but subtle distinction, right? This is not about how many gigahertz we've got, but this is about how we help someone solve a problem. And it's also about how our product is different from alternatives, right? How is it different from the status quo? How is it different from competitors? Because at the end of the day, the prospect is going to be thinking about, why should I use your product rather than doing something else? And then finally, there are impact themes, right? And these are about the business value that you're creating. So you're going to identify the types of benefit that you provide and estimate the magnitude of each of those types of benefit, right? So problem, solution, impact, PSI, hence PSI selling. Now, the idea of these three theme types is that they create persuasive momentum. There's a kind of flow from one theme to the next to the next. So problems naturally set up solutions, which naturally set up impacts, which naturally leads to a purchase, right? And so just to give you an example of that, let's imagine that your problem is, you are behind on lead generation because your outbound response rates are too low, right? We have a need for action here. And we're kind of adding an insight about that problem that's going to set up our solution, right? The real issue here is these low outbound response rates. That's what this problem is really about. And then that sets up our solution, which is we're going to help you raise response rates with our AI-driven customized outbound outreach, right? So our solution theme, it's not about, boy, we have this really cool AI, right? We're talking about how we help them solve the problem and specifically how we just match the way that we've defined that problem perfectly with our solution. And that then sets up our impact, right? And our impact is that we're going to drive 25% more pipeline, helping you hit your annual revenue targets, right? And this impact kind of naturally flows out of a solution, right? If somebody is really on board with our solution, they're kind of ready. They're ready for us to talk about the impact, and they're kind of primed to view our impact description as being persuasive. And that then naturally leads to a purchase. Now, for most teams, you should generate 3 problems, 3 solutions, and 3 impacts. And the basic reason for that is that is enough to kind of capture all the different aspects of your product, but it's not so many that it creates confusion. Now, this idea of this kind of persuasive flow, it works for creating a conversation, but it also works for diagnosing a problem in your sales persuasion. So if part of your presentation isn't landing, one way to figure out what might be wrong is to go up the flow. So if your impact points are not landing, well, ask yourself, have we really proven that the solution is the right solution? If our solution isn't landing, ask yourself, have you really kind of proven that the problem exists? And crucially, have you characterized it? Have you kind of proven your take or your insight on the problem? And if your problem isn't landing with the prospect, well, then ask yourself, are they really the right type of company, right? Do they engage in the right business processes? Do they have the right systems and so on? Now, just to kind of really zoom out a little bit, um, a really effective set of themes will be parallel. And what that means is that the first problem leads to the first solution, which leads to the first impact. And the second problem leads to the second solution, which leads to the second impact. And so it'll look like a grid, right? You've got kind of all of your themes all on this sort of grid. Now, this isn't always possible, right? Don't sweat it too much. But gosh, if you can make it work, it really leads to some very effective and clean persuasion. So here's an example. So our first problem, you need to effectively scale opportunity generation, leads to our first solution, intelligent and scaled outreach creates more opportunities, leads to our first impact, right? Increased pipeline through better prospecting. Our second problem, you need to increase opportunity win rates, leads to our second solution, AI Copilot recommends effective follow-up, leads to our second impact, higher win rate with more effective engagement. Our third problem, you need more management visibility for better forecast accuracy, leads to our third solution, right? Insight dashboards predict future revenue, which leads to our third impact, right? More ability to plan and adjust strategy as well as resource allocation. So this is what a set of parallel themes look like. As I say, it's not mandatory, it's not always possible, but gosh, if you can do it, it is really effective. So that leads us to kind of the second major piece of our discussion, which is now that you've got all of these great themes, how do we make sure that they actually impact your real sales conversations? And this is a critical issue because it's really easy for your messaging to get lost, right? If you're a sales rep doing a demo, gosh, it is so easy to just click on buttons and talk about features and just forget about your messaging. So the tool that we're going to use to make sure that our messaging actually appears in real sales conversations is something called summary slides. And so it's actually a really simple concept, right? We've got our themes, right? We've got 3 themes of each theme type, and we built 3 slides, right? We've got a problem slide that sets up a solution slide, which sets up an impact slide. Super simple. But it turns out that these summary slides are probably the most important kind of customer-facing sales tool we have because they lead off most of our sales conversations and they help us keep the focus on themes. So if we're doing an overview presentation, we'll start out with our summary slides, right, that summarize problem, solution, and impact. And then our first major section will be about the problems we solve. The second major section will be about the solutions we offer. The third major section will be about the impacts we deliver. And then finally, we'll talk about next steps. So similarly, in a demo, we'll start off the same way by sharing our summary slides. Now, of course, a demo is naturally more about the solution. So the body of the demo is going to be broken up into sections that are based on the kind of elements of our solution, right? So the first section will be about our first solution theme. Second section about the second solution theme. Third section about the third solution theme, and then on to next steps. But the core idea here is that for the vast majority of our sales conversations, we start in the same way. We start with summary slides, and that makes it natural to just keep talking about those themes instead of getting lost in something else. Now, the other thing that these summary slides let us do is they let us make sure that we adapt the themes to the deal that we're selling, right? So let's imagine kind of different sales conversations and different themes. And the idea here is that in every sales conversation, right, we're starting with our summary slides and we're getting feedback. And then after that conversation, we're updating our summary slides. And then on the next call, we're presenting an evolved kind of edited version of the themes. So on our discovery call, we're presenting our product themes, right? Those are the themes that are true about our product in general. We're getting feedback. And then on the demo, we're presenting the first version of our deal themes, right? And these are the product themes adapted to the context of that specific deal, right? We get feedback on the demo. And then on our scoping call, we present a revised version of the deal themes. We get more feedback. And then on the proposal call, we're presenting still another kind of revision of those deal themes. Now, the other really crucial thing that summary slides do is that they make sure that your themes are impacting the conversation where your prospect makes their final decision. And the key problem here is that the prospect often makes their final decision during a conversation where you are not in the room, right? So their VP meets with their CFO and your champion is there, and your champion is kind of making the case for the purchase, right? So how do you make sure that your themes can be there even if you are not there personally? So the answer is that summary slides kind of help your messaging flow from your company's kind of drawing board all the way to that conversation where the decision is made, right? So you set out your company's value themes, you embody those in summary slides, those then appear in sales conversations. You get feedback as the reps edit those summary slides, and then crucially, your sales reps they hand those summary slides off to the champion, and the champion uses them as their guide for those internal deliberations, right? And so that means that your themes are there in the room when that final decision is being made, and that then ensures that they can help shape the final decision. So these are some great tools for defining sales-ready messaging and then being sure that those sales-ready messages are impacting real conversations and real decisions. To take things forward, check out our website. There you'll find resources on effective discovery, strategic negotiation, hidden gem hiring, structured demos, persuasive sales writing, and action-focused onboarding. And with that, most importantly, as always, happy selling.